I'm Roger Wright, and welcome to another edition of Glory on Grandview, Tales of Grizzly Football. Well, today I've got a kind of a different angle story for you. It is November. We just celebrated Veterans Day and honored our veterans on Veterans Day, and got me thinking about a great story that I know of with our guest, and it's a tough story sometimes to tell. It's a tough story sometimes to hear, but definitely a story after you hear it that you'll see why we're telling it and how it fits in with the Glory on Grandview football theme. So my guest today is a very special one. It is Coach Larry Smith. Larry, welcome. It's good to have you here on Glory on Grandview. And Larry and I got to work together years ago in coaching and then at the high school. And while he was there, it was when I was teaching American history. And we had a panel of speakers every year when we'd get to the Vietnam War. And we had a panel of speakers that would come in and talk to the students about their personal experiences in Vietnam. Now, Larry was one of the speakers, but we also had the teacher from the middle school, teacher Rod Rush, and then one of our friends and teachers from the high school, Mike Winkler. So we had two other Vietnam veterans that were right there on staff, and then we had some others come in that we may mention as we talk today. But Larry, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today. And it starts off, you grew up in Northeast Ohio, not too far from here. You were in Doylestown. You went to the high school there, played some football, and had your first experiences there. And then it was the mid-'60s and late '60s, and the war in Vietnam was going on. And soon Uncle Sam's call was issued out to one Larry Smith. And so maybe pick it up there and talk us about the beginning of your story in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, first off, unless you were physically or something, most everybody got drafted. Okay, I mean, you were going to get drafted if you didn't have some physical reason why you couldn't go, and even if you did, you had to go take a physical. So I got drafted. I mean, I got sent up to Cleveland. They passed me, and Thanksgiving Day of 1967, I left. 68, I guess it was. 68, I left for Vietnam. So
right at this time of year, this is when your journey began. And a very tumultuous time in history in America, lots of division, by that time, some anti-war protests going on, some in the United States. And I'm sure, it was difficult being drafted and then, being sent. But the mindset that you went in with was what? When you got that draft notice and it was, you started your training and everything?
Well, I think I was like everybody else. I mean, it wasn't exactly where I wanted to be, but did I try to get out of it? No, and most of my family, past family, my grandfather was in World War I, my dad was a paratrooper in World War II, and so, and don't get me wrong, it wasn't no hero thing or something, but, I didn't do anything not to go, and I went up and took a physical, and I think 3 weeks later, they scheduled me to leave, and,
All right, there you were.
Basic training.
You were in your training, and then, all right, so jump ahead then. So you went through your basic training, and then you were
went to AIT, which is infantry training. Okay, they got put in the infantry, and I think they put most athletes went to infantry. I don't know why, but it was one of the things on your thing, and I'm sure they used it because just about everybody that was in the infantry were usually, not all of them, but 90% of them was probably some kind of athletes. And I went down we did basic training at Fort in Knox in Kentucky. Got right out of Fort Knox, they put us on a train and sent us right down to Fort McClellan, Alabama, where we went through infantry training. 2 weeks of special training in the swamps in Fort Polk, Louisiana. Flew home for 30 days and went back to Vietnam.
All right, so let's pick it up there. So when you get into the country, you get into Vietnam, maybe talk a little bit about your unit and what where you were in Vietnam and what your unit was doing.
My unit was, they call us river rats, okay? We were with the Navy, we actually stayed on during the wet season and stuff. During the monsoons, we stayed on a ship as a Navy ship out in the South China Sea, because you couldn't stay inland. You know, it was all flooded. I was down in the Delta, and we pretty much, yeah, there's a shot right there, one of the ships. You'll see pictures here of we're on the ships there. That's me looking out over the South China Sea. But when we'd go out on operations, and then as soon as it was over or whatever, we'd end up going back to. Now this is a picture. This is during the dry season, we called it, and this was actually there was canals on all sides of us. Okay, but this was our platoon, and that's where we lived during the dry season. Okay, that's a bunker behind us, and that's pretty much, you know, where you stayed. This is some of the guys that was me, and some of the guys that was in a platoon. I think I was there 5 months, and I think after I was there 5 months, I think I was the ranking officer or ranking personnel, been there longer, and I became the platoon sergeant, which at 18 years old, that's overwhelming for a little bit. You know, you got to worry about where everybody's at, if we're getting fed, you know. And it was tough. There's no doubt about it. As an 18-year-old, it was not easy.
So Larry, 18 years old, you find yourself in a leadership position. I mean, you know, fairly shortly after you got there, and I believe that is probably because and I know your story, your unit was constantly being shipped wherever there was action.
Yeah.
So if there was fighting going on, you were aboard that Navy ship because you would kind of base there, right? But then if there was an area of fighting, they would ship you there immediately and get you guys in. And I think what was happening, it was just attrition, right? Like you guys were losing a lot of people, and you found yourself in a leadership.
And we worked with the Navy, the boats with a ramp, like Second World War, they had the ramps. They'd load us up on an operation, take us out, and when we got to where we was going, they just dropped that ramp, and you know, like in the war, like in the ocean, you just had to get off.
And you shared with me, you said guys used to jockey for position, right, to try to get off first, because they were worried about bullets rattling around in the boat, and somebody getting
they chewed in
hit
there. The
that
bullet
way.
just rattled around in there, so guys actually crowded to get to the front of the boat so you could get off first. And of course, if you were I felt like a good officer or something, you let them go. Yeah, so, and it was trying. There was no doubt about it, you know. And you had to face the fact that you lost people, you know,
and really lost them at an alarming rate. I mean, with your platoon, you lost a lot of people because of the fighting that you were involved in so frequently. So you mentioned the dry season. That looks like the wet season.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it was the wet season. It's just a canal, okay? And the canals run water all year, okay, out of the South
Like
China.
a dike, right?
No, it's just a canal, okay? It's got banks, and you know, this looks like it might have been around a banana plantation, and we were crossing. They called them rivers. We called them canals. You know, they weren't very wide. You know, but you stayed wet. You know, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is a sampan, okay, and
little boats that were along the canals.
And you know what? It was kind of like you had to quickly decide whether you thought they were causing you harm or not. You know. And this is a picture of me when I got shot in the mouth, a sniper shot.
We'll get to some of your injuries here in a minute.
But I'm just saying that's what it is, okay.
So Larry, talk about that. And then in this picture too, this is a great picture. That's General Westmoreland, who was the overall commander for the American troops in Vietnam, shaking your hand. And I know there's a funny story behind that one. So. But let's back up. We have the Purple Hearts. We have 4 of your Purple Hearts, where there's actually one that's missing from the case because you were wounded 5 times in Vietnam. So talk about the first time you were wounded then.
Yeah, the first time it was a booby trap, and I thought I might lose both hands and stuff, you know, but they turned out okay. I mean, you know, the second time that go on down the thing. See, the second time was I was running along a dike, and they opened fire, a rice paddy, a dike. They opened fire on us, and actually I thought this kid behind me tripped me. And we got in, we see the blood in the water and stuff, and started looking, and actually I got shot through the leg. In fact, that was when he was giving me the Purple Heart for that when I got shot.
Okay, so tell your funny story about General Westmoreland.
Well, when I was a platoon sergeant, and there was this bubble helicopter was flying over us about time to set up at night, and my company sergeant called and said, "Sergeant Smith." I said, "Yeah." He says, "Are you guys in position for tonight?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "No, you're not." I said, "Yes, we are." He says, "This is not the coordinates that were given to set up at night." I said, "Sarge, that's right in the middle of a rice paddy. It's wide open. There's wood lines on all sides of us. There's hardly any dikes behind or anything." He says, "No, you need to go to the coordinates that they told you." I said, "Okay," and I just shut off the radio. Okay, next thing I know,
intending not to do it.
No. My radio operator said, "Hey, there's somebody on this phone that says they're in that helicopter and they want to talk to you." So I said, "Okay." So I said, he told me who it was. And he told me he was a commanding general. Okay, I didn't register, because what he said next was, "You need to move out to that coordinates that we gave you." Okay, it's because we have our artillery all set up. I said, "Well, I imagine they do too, and right in the middle of that rice paddy where it's going to be neck deep, where we set all night." I said, "I'm not going," and I shut my radio off. When he came, I got hit that day.
And you were wounded, yeah.
In the hospital. He stopped, he came to our company. He told my sergeant that he wanted to meet the guy that told him to go to H. He says, "I've never had anybody do that." And my sergeant says, "You'll have to go to the 3rd hospital." He said he got wounded out there.
Yeah.
So he came to the hospital and he gave me my Purple Heart.
Yeah. That's a neat story. And you appreciated your leadership and saying, "No, that's not right, and this is how it needs."
I wasn't sure how much he appreciated it.
I'm sure he didn't like it, but after he saw what you were talking about, he probably understood it.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that in your case you have 4 Purple Hearts. You're missing a Purple Heart, so those 2 times. The first time a booby trap, then you were shot through the calf.
Yeah.
There one time, and then. So each time they'd kind of patch you up, and you would get back. And once, when we were doing our panel of speakers, we had a really neat reunion, and that I was happy to be part of. You saw for the first time since Vietnam one of the nurses that you had known that had taken care of you in the hospital, and her name was Kathy Cassane. She was a lovely lady, great veteran. Nurse from Vietnam, and it was so fun. She kind of looked at you. You and I laughed, didn't we? Yeah. She kind of looked at you, and you kind of looked at her, and she asked your name, and you guys started talking, and the next thing you know, she was opening up her scrapbook, and there she had a picture of you and some other soldiers that you were in the hospital.
She said, "Do you know this? Do you recognize this picture?" And I said, "Yeah, I got one just like it." I showed my wife that picture last night. I said, "Here's that picture that I said, "This is a picture." What a reunion that was. She was really. That was.
Yeah, and one of the things, and you mentioned the other wound, the next wound that you got there, where you were shot from a sniper in a tree. You were walking. You told me a good story. They said they told the leader not to walk next to the radio man, because they were always trying to get the leader of the platoon. But you said you had just made a call on a radio, you guys were walking, and then the sniper in a tree saw you with the radio in your hand, and you were shot then from above, glancing off your nose, hitting you in the mouth.
Right down took out 9 teeth.
Took out 9 teeth, and I remember Kathy, your nurse, saying, "Man, we thought Larry should have been sent home after that wound. It was a bad wound." And boy, they patched you up. They wired your broken jaw shut, and shipped you back. You thought you might go to Japan and go home. Yeah. And by all rights you probably should have, but somehow you ended up back with your unit and leading that. So
Yeah, you know what? After you got back, you felt some loyalty to the ones that were there because there wasn't anybody that was there when I left. You know, it was a whole new platoon. They were all young, you know, so, you know, you felt like that. I went to the field for 4.5 weeks with my jaw still wired together. The only thing I could do was eat through where the teeth were gone, you know. Couldn't chew nothing, you know. But anyway, but it all worked out.
Well, and again, that's a testimony to you as well, because you knew you had a lot of young guys in the platoon, and like they didn't have a lot of people with experience, you know, by that time. So I think that says a lot about your leadership and your dedication. But so then go on after you got back from that wound.
Yeah, I got back from that wound, and it was probably, I think, 3 days. I stepped in a bungee pit. That's what it is. They put a covering over it, and when you walk, you fall down through, and they have they file barbs on, and when your foot goes through, it goes right up through your foot. So it went up through my heel. They flew me out of there. They cut the barb off, flew me out to a field hospital, took the barb out of my foot, sewed it up, and 3 days later, it sent me back to the field.
Once again, you're patched up quickly and sent back in, and again the second time, and when you and I talked, we said that was the one thing about, you know, guys like you were so valuable that had been there, that were getting some experience with the fighting and with the booby traps and how to stay safe. But again, it just goes to show what a dangerous place it was to be and how difficult.
And you got to realize this was about the time the Tet Offensive was about ready to take place. So they had a lot of troops, and they were moving them all down from the north and stuff. They were getting ready for that attack.
Now you mentioned that, and you have a very interesting story. The Tet Offensive, one of the key points in the war, really, when the enemy, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese launched an attack all across the sectors of the country, and the idea wasn't necessarily that militarily it wasn't going to succeed, but back at home that showed the American public, right, that we're not, you know, they kept hearing the war's almost over, and it kind of showed their resolve, and they weren't close to being done. But that found you outside the United States Embassy.
Right in front of it.
Right in front of the United States Embassy, protecting the embassy that night while it was under attack.
Well, yeah, it kind of, but what happened is they had already taken over the embassy, and they sent my platoon and 3 other ones in there. Well, we spread out. We were behind a pillar right in front of the embassy, and I've had all kinds of people say, well, why didn't you just level the embassy? We couldn't level the embassy because we didn't know if the dignitaries had got out of there. So, you know, we spent 2 days and 2 nights there, and every time at night I'd fire my weapon. They'd shoot machine guns back, and they were chipping away at my concrete protection there, and it got a little scary.
Oh, I bet. So a part of that now, so the bungee stick and the pit there, and that wound, and then one more time.
Yeah, the other time was when we was walking through the jungle, and it was a claymore. It's a mine. They set it up. It was one of ours, to be honest with you. Deadly weapon, just blows everything out. Luckily, our platoon was off. They didn't let us. They let us go too far. And when they fired that, the shrapnel from there, some of it went into my stomach and stuff. And it went through my appendix. So they took my appendix and stuff out. When they took I got a funny story quickly if you want to hear it. I just had gallbladder surgery 2 or 3 weeks ago. They wanted to do an MRI, but because there's so much shrapnel still in me, they were worried that magnetic MRI was going to suck it right up through they was afraid to do the MRI.
Oh boy, carrying around the shrapnel. I remember Rod Rush also when he was on our panel, and Rod still had shrapnel as well from a wound that he had. Every
time I'd go to the hospital, they'd take an X-ray like on my leg or something. They'd come back and say, "Do you know what this is?"
You have to let them know. Yeah, I do know what it is. You remembered it well. So, well, Larry, we said that platoon of yours, you went to war with what, 23? 23. And 20. How many you were?
We went over as a unit at 23. And out of the 23, 2 of us came home.
You and one other soldier came
Dick,
home.
his name was Dick. It was Dick Shaftsrath's brother.
The famous Cleveland Brown, his brother from Worcester.
Ed.
Ed and you were the two.
Well, we were 2 that came back. Okay,
came back.
but yeah, it wasn't a good year. I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't like I knew those guys forever. You met them in basic training, but you went through basic and AIT and then went over there as a unit. You know, and it's sad because you look through all the pictures and just like constantly showing your pictures and stuff, you know, and it's, you know, it was hard. I mean, it's hard now. You know, it's hard to, you know, years I didn't even,
Didn't want to talk about it.
I wouldn't talk about it.
You talked about coming home and how difficult that was. All you guys talked about that.
When you did that,
the panel
brought me out of that some, because I seen with meeting Kathy there, made me see how much, you know, the kids really enjoyed it.
They loved it. Every year at the end of the year, I'd ask them what was the best thing that we did, the most impactful learning experience, and they always said that hearing from you guys, you could hear a pin drop when you guys talked in there every year, and I was the same way. I just enjoyed, you know, hearing your stories. It's so real. It's, you know, now you think about Veterans Day and everything. You know, you guys are what I think of. So, but you know, coming home, I remember all you guys said how difficult that was. Yeah. By that time, the nation really was. The anti-war protest had grown quite a bit, and all you guys said when you came home, very difficult. You wanted to disassociate yourself from Vietnam. You just wanted to blend back into society, although on the inside, you know, very difficult to blend back in after, you know, what you guys had been through.
It was. Let your hair grow fast.
Yeah, I remember all you guys said that because the military haircut was a dead giveaway that you had been there, right? So you let that hair grow out and you just tried to get it behind you. But then everybody, you guys, I know you said it and I know Mike said it, that, you know, there were times you were called out.
Yeah.
In a negative way, like, you know, shame on you for you know, serving in Vietnam. And I hope that's one of the lessons that our country learned from Vietnam is to appreciate the sacrifices that our soldiers made.
Actually, there was a thing at Kent State, you know, that thing, and they read off a bunch of people from the area. There was a guy from Barberton that was a councilman. His son was involved in that shooting and stuff. But they read off names and they said, if you know these people, you know, they were part of that murderous bunch of people that was in Vietnam. You know,
yeah.
So.
Yeah. And again.
And my name was one of them.
Yeah, and I hope, again, I think that's a lesson that our nation learned. But on a positive note, you made it back. You came back to the United States, and life went on for you, and I know it was rough. But you know, let's show some of the pictures here. Your coaching days, you came back, and you know, you got to, there you are when you started coaching football, and your son Jay was in the program. You said you met Ron Jones. Ron was the head coach at the time, and you had coached Bobby in some youth sports. So you had done some youth coaching, and Ron asked you if you'd like to be a part of the Grizzly program. So there you are there in the 1991 Grizzly sports program, Coach Larry Smith, and that's when you and I got to meet each other, and here we are, you know, younger there in the younger days. Yeah. And the coaching staff, Coach Shepard, Ramsey Shepard was the head coach at that time, and you know, then you said the cool thing. You got to be with Jay all the way. Your son Jay, there he is. You got to be with him all through youth sports, through middle school, all through high school, wrestling and football. And there's you know, a picture there at the middle school with Coach Thompson and Coach Turbett. But you know, you got to be a part of all that, and then you also got into some softball.
Smelser.
Yeah, there's my wife Sharon. You and Sharon were coaching together, so you introduced us to our first meal, a squirrel. You did some squirrel hunting and brought some squirrel over to the house. I always teased you about that, and then you showed me how good squirrel can be. But appreciate that. And there's your wife Connie.
Yeah.
Came back there and you know, found a great wife there in Connie, and then your daughter. There's your son Jay now, a little older, and his grandson.
His wife went to school in Wadsworth here. and she's a teacher in Norton. This is my daughter and her son Hunter. You had Hunter in the program, and his sister Allie.
Yeah, Hunter in the Great Masonry program, great skills, and
doing well.
Doing a good job. So, well, Larry, you know, looking back on everything at your age now, and I know it's always hard to think about this stuff, but looking back on it now, your perspective, you know, having gone through this on behalf of, you know, the citizens of the United States.
Well,
why do you look back on it now?
I don't have any. I mean, I don't have any like hard feelings or nothing. You know, there's times you could look back and say, why did they do this? Okay, but you know, you could do that with anything. You know, so.
And I know you were helpful with our friend Mike Winkler with some veterans groups. You know, reaching out when Mike was, you know, he's passed away now, but he needed some help at the end of life there, and you got him hooked up, and there's so many good organizations now that help with veterans, and I know you were instrumental in getting Mike some help, and encourage our viewers, any of these organizations, if you'd like to donate or you know, support all great organizations. And to tie it up with our Grizzly football, every year we do a salute the troops. You know, Coach Todd and the guys, they have special jerseys, and they meet with some of the veterans from the American Legion, and it's just a neat way to celebrate, you know, the service and sacrifice of our men and women in the armed forces. So, again, I want to thank you, my friend, for everything, your service in Vietnam, and
I want to thank you.
Everything you've done. So, all right.
Thanks.
Thank you, and join us next time on Glory on Grandview, Tales of Grizzly Football.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.